This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Now, earlier this week, I talked about players that I'm concerned about. But it's time to switch gears. Instead of talking about players I'm concerned about, let's talk about players that I'm excited about. And just like that video, the excitement isn't going to be limited just because of what I've seen in camp, even though that's going to play a factor. It's going to be about the situations that they're going to be in based on what I've seen in camp and why that would be exciting. The first guy I have on this list is the most obvious answer, right? And it's DeShaun Watson. He was able to knock the rust off, whatever that means, in the last 6 games of the season. I think more importantly than knocking the rust off, he's in a system and in an offense that's more tailored towards him versus being tailored towards having a more standard quarterback like Jacoby Brissett playing it. So now he's in a system that fits him. Now he's in a system that's for him. Now he's going to be able to play the football that he's played his entire NFL career, and he'll probably look like the player that he's been for the bulk of his NFL career. It's been interesting to see the assumption that like a 27-year-old quarterback who's played more Pro Bowl seasons in his career than he's played non-Pro Bowl seasons in his career is automatically going to be like terrible because he sat out for a couple of seasons or for the bulk of one season in the whole season. So I don't know where those assumptions come from. I don't think they're really that founded. And you can go back. Remember, everybody wanted to bring up Mike Vick when people were telling us that DeShaun wasn't going to be good after coming back, and that ended up being true. Well, if we're going to bring up Mike Vick in his first few games back after not playing for a while, even though he kind of went to jail, that was a little bit different of a situation. Then let's talk about Mike Vick after he got reacclimated to football again. He looked pretty good, didn't he? And I don't know if they were the same age. They might have been similar ages at that point, but their play styles are completely different. So just saying, right? We brought people, detractors were willing to bring up Mike Vick a lot last year. They're not so willing to bring up Mike Vick this year. I think we all know that he's probably going to look like the quarterback that he's been most of his career at the very least, if not an improved version of that. We'll see. But I'm excited to see what Watson looks like, given that he's actually going to be playing his brand of football this year instead of being plugged in late in the year in this weird situation that he was in. Next player I want to talk about is Elijah Moore. Because if you've watched the camp clips, if you've kept up with camp, if you've watched this channel during camp, you know Elijah Moore been looking pretty good. Now, that doesn't guarantee anything. Many of wide receivers have looked good in camp. The season starts, and then we're talking about what happened to all these reports about Elijah Moore looking good. Camp is a little bit camp leans towards wide receivers in a couple of ways, right? One drills, wide receivers is really easy to win that. They just want to do a double move. They can win it depending on how the cornerbacks are coached. If you're teaching a cornerback to be aggressive on double moves because you want to have a pick heavy defense, kind of similar to how Mike Tomlin does in Pittsburgh. Hey, you can win one-on-ones all day if you're a wide receiver, right? So it's easier for wide receivers to look good in camp. But still, Elijah Moore has looked pretty good. He looks like somebody who has the potential to be a number 1 receiver, but definitely is going to be a dynamic piece to this offense. And I'm just excited about what that can mean for DeShaun, what DeShaun means for Elijah Moore, and what these two can do together, because it looks like there's definitely a nice fit there between these two players. Next player I'm going to talk about is Nick Chubb, because we don't talk about the positives of this situation for Nick Chubb enough. Honestly, we talked about the negatives so much, right? Like whenever the offense started changing and we started having these conversations within the fan base, the main conversation that people were having for whatever reason was, oh, Nick Chubb's going to get phased out the offense. Nick Chubb's not going to benefit from this. Should we even pay Nick Chubb if we're not going to feature him as much? And I always thought that those were premature. Because who said we weren't going to feature Nick Chubb as much? Who said Nick Chubb wasn't going to get his carries? Now, some people will go, hey, look, he only got this percentage of the carries last year. He's only going to get this percentage of carries this year. Well, Kareem Hunt's not here for a reason. They're not really panicking to replace a running back 2 right now. You know why that is, right? Because running back 2 is a irrelevant spot for this team. Who's Derrick Henry's backup? I'll wait. I don't know. You don't know either, right? Tell me who Derrick Henry's backup is without Googling it. Do you know who Derrick Henry's backup is? What about Christian McCaffrey's backup? Y'all know who that is? See, the difference of Nick Chubb from this year and last year is the last few years you've known the name of his backup because his backup wasn't really a backup. They were also a key role in his offense in Kareem Hunt. Nick Chubb's not splitting carries anymore. In the same way, it's not that relevant who Derrick Henry's backup is. The same way it's not that relevant who Christian McCaffrey's backup is. It's the same way that right now, the way the Cleveland Browns offense is structured, doesn't really matter who Nick Chubb's backup is. The offensive line is probably good enough to carry whoever they want to throw out there. If they need to throw somebody out there, if there's an injury, then you're just going to run Watson more and throw Watson more. Like, it's not the end of the world. Like, it doesn't matter as much. Because what's going to happen is instead of Nick Chubb taking 65 to 70% of the carries, he's going to take 85 to 90% of the carries, which leaves a little sliver for that backup running back. And part of that sliver is probably going to be eaten up by DeShaun Watson, who's going to take a bigger role in this run game. So ultimately, we're looking at maybe 100 carries for the backup running back. So it just doesn't matter. So the premature thought that Nick Chubb's going to have a reduced role, I think, is wrong. I think Nick Chubb's probably going to have 280 something carries this year, maybe even hit 300 again. He's going to be more important than ever to this offense because they're going to rely on Nick Chubb and Nick Chubb services alone at running back more than they've ever have. Partly because they need to, but partly because he's Nick Chubb. And also because since Nick Chubb doesn't have to be the best player on the offense anymore, he doesn't have to carry the same load. You can use him more because you'll be in more advantageous situations. Think about this. Since 2018, every defensive coordinator that's played the Cleveland Browns, their main focus has been what? How in the world do we stop Nick Chubb? What's our plan for Nick Chubb? What do we do with Nick Chubb? Hey, are we just going to stack the box? What's up? How are we playing Nick Chubb? Every guest, whenever I bring on guests to talk about their opponents, or to talk about the opponents and what the opponent's philosophy should be versus the Cleveland Browns, when we get to their defense, it's about what? Stopping Nick Chubb. It's never been about what do we do with Baker Mayfield. It's never been about what do we do with Odell Beckham. They were never that dominant a player while they were in Cleveland. But you know who has been one of the best players in his position? Nick Chubb. It's been that way from 2018 to 2019 to 2020 to 2021 to 2022. But it's not going to be that way in 2023. And think about it. Nick Chubb, throughout that period of time, 2018, 2022, has been the main focus of every defense that he's come in contact with. Every defense that he's come in contact with. And he still averages 5 yards a carry. And he still puts up the gaudy numbers that he puts up. And he still had 1,500 yards last year. Every defensive coordinator is trying to do everything they can to stop Nick Chubb. And Nick Chubb still balls. What's going to happen if Nick Chubb becomes an afterthought? Because teams are too worried about what they're going to do with DeShaun and what they're going to do with Elijah Moore and what they're going to do in the red zone when it comes to David Njoku. What happens when Nick Chubb becomes an afterthought to defensive coordinators? It's a scary thought, not for Browns fans, but for everybody else. Just saying. Very, very excited about one Nicholas Chubb. David Njoku is somebody who interests me because if you look at DeShaun's numbers, if you look at what DeShaun has excelled at, especially in the red zone, a tight end has always benefited from the presence of DeShaun Watson. I don't expect that trend to change. You go to Houston, you see a lot of tight ends that benefited from DeShaun Watson, especially in the red zone. I think David Njoku won't be any different, especially now since the Browns have more red zone options than they had in years past. The thing that I feel like has held David Njoku back in the red zone has been the fact that the Browns have had only David Njoku as a true option in the red zone, right? For the longest time, we had this like squad of 6-foot wide receivers who couldn't really go over the top. We refused to use Odell Beckham in a fade route for whatever reason while he was here. Kevin Stefanski, whoever was the coach, Freddie Kitchens included, like everybody who had Odell Beckham here for whatever reason. Maybe it was because Baker couldn't throw a good fade ball, but they just refused to let Odell run a fade in the red zone, even though he turned out to be really good in that. So you didn't utilize him properly as a red zone option. The only person that you were really utilizing was David Njoku, and that made it easy for teams to key in on him. Now we have a lot of different options. We're going to throw some fade balls to Cedric Tillman or somebody like that. Maybe even Elijah Moore gets in that action. And there's just going to be more places to spread the defense out to allow David Njoku to get a one-on-one to take advantage of the size mismatch that he's going to be able to create in the red zone. So I think that on top of DeShaun Watson's history of benefiting tight ends wherever he goes, that's going to be a huge boon to this offense. So that's the offensive stuff that I'm really excited about. And I'm sure me just talking about that has y'all excited. But let's move over to the defensive stuff that has me excited. And it starts with Myles Garrett, the best player on the defense. And it's not because Myles looks any different. It's not because Myles is going to play any different. But it's because Myles is finally going to be unlocked. You go back to 2017. Myles was injured. Greg Williams didn't let him use a secondary pass rush move for whatever reason, and he was a rookie. He was not unlocked. You go to 2018. Same kind of situation, right? Greg Williams doesn't let him use an extra pass rush move. He's still a second-year player, still developing. He's not unlocked. 2019, it starts to get up there, right? You got some decent help with Olivier Vernon. You have a decent interior. Myles had 10 sacks in like 10 games, but then he smacked somebody upside the helmet with the helmet, and he gets suspended, not unlocked. We go to 2020. Myles looks really good. Starts dominating. Defensive line was actually decent that year. Jadeveon Clowney, I thought, played what was that 2021 that he played well? I don't think we had Jadeveon in 2020. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did we have Jadeveon on the team for 3 years? I think Jadeveon was on the team. But either way, whoever was on the team, and I think it was still Olivier Vernon at this point, had some decent help, but he got COVID. Didn't really look the same for a little while, actually, after that COVID. 2021, he has good help, gets 16 sacks. Looks like he's about to unlock himself. 2022 happens, has no help at all. Finally, Myles Garrett's going to have help. People compare Myles Garrett's numbers to TJ Watt, despite the fact that everybody who knows football will tell you TJ Watt's not better than Myles Garrett. The one thing TJ Watt does have over Myles Garrett is some of those accounting numbers, right? The sack numbers. The reason TJ Watt has those numbers is because TJ Watt has had tremendous help his entire career. He was opposite of Bud Dupree early in his career. Bud Dupree leaves, Alex Highsmith. Now, that's not the only one. The one who's been there most of the time, Cam Hayward, another double-digit sack guy. Think about that. TJ Watt has had the luxury of playing with 2 double-digit sack guys alongside of him. Myles Garrett might have had 2 individuals over his entire career get double-digit sacks that weren't him. Well, I'm thinking what? Olivier Vernon? Think he had double-digit sacks the year that Myles went out? And Clowney got 9. Like, correct me if I'm wrong. I think those are the only 2 that came close to double digits that weren't Myles Garrett on those teams. So the help has not been nearly the same. Let's not even talk about the system being much different and the fact that TJ plays on the right side, Myles plays on the left side. Myles is finally going to have the help that he needs, the ability, the flexibility from a defensive coordinator standpoint to be put where he needs to be put, and also a defensive mind that is, I don't want to say in the same class as Mike Tomlin, but it's not an embarrassment to compare Myles' defensive coordinator to Pittsburgh's defensive coordinator like it was with Joe Woods. All of that combined tells me that Myles Garrett's going to have a pretty good year. You also think about Dalvin Tomlinson. Now, I've heard a lot about these defensive tackles in camp or edge rushers as well. The one guy that people are like, hey, he looks great and nobody's talking about it, Dalvin Tomlinson. I'm excited to see what he looks like. I wonder if he's going to play in the preseason game. If he does, that'd be interesting to see. But I've heard nothing but great things about Dalvin Tomlinson. I'm very excited about him, especially with the addition of Shelby Harris. Now you got Siaki Ika. You're just missing one man in that rotation. That's the fourth man. I'm fine with that. All of a sudden you go from a minor league defensive line rotation to pretty good. Crazy. Crazy how that goes. And then the last guy I want to talk about, we're going to talk about a corner, but it's not going to be Denzel Ward. Not even Greg Newsome, who y'all know I'm very high. We're talking about Martin M.J. Emerson. Because my man's having a good camp. He had a good season last year. And there's a real question to be had on if the assumption that Martin Emerson's this team's third best corner is still true. We'll find out during the season. There's nothing we're going to see during camp that's going to change that assumption. But he's done enough to challenge it. Maybe he might be the best corner on this team. Maybe he might be the second best corner on this team. We'll see. But Martin Emerson has me excited. It seems like he's making plays in camp. It seems like he's holding up pretty well in camp. And all the corners are holding up well. I haven't heard bad things about Greg Newsome or Denzel Ward. But Martin Emerson's the one that pops out to people that he looks great. And I think that's going to be interesting to see when the season starts, because the Browns can have 3 top-level corners. They're going to be in a pretty good position, especially that defensive line gets as many pressures as people are predicting. But those are the players I'm excited about and the reasons I'm excited about those players. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have a good night.